Toho inaugurated the new millennium by resurrecting Godzilla for a whole new era, one that would be defined by explosive special effects, a focus on monsters from films past, and an anthology style that saw each film exist in its own continuity, separate from each other. This allowed the filmmakers to explore more disparate themes without being hindered by a need to adhere to plot carrying over from the films that came before, and resulted in a run of 6 films that are each wildly different, but equally as powerful in their individual messages and themes. The Millennium era ran from 1999 until Godzilla's 50th anniversary in 2004, and offered fans perhaps the most diverse and adventurous era in the franchise's history. After a brief 5-year hiatus, Toho knew the best way to usher in a new millennium would be with a new era of Godzilla films. It would set the tone for the Millennium era, featuring sci-fi plots and fast-paced action, as well as utilizing state-of-the-art computer-generated effects more than ever before. It was truly Godzilla for a new age, in Takao Akawara's 1999 film, Godzilla 2000.
Let them fight.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll be back.
Death has come to your little township.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Chills and Thrills. My name is Connor Dunham and I am here with Chris, and we are ready to do Godzilla 2000 or Godzilla 2000 Millennium. And Chris, I just watched the Japanese version of this film for the very first time today, and I've heard and read that this was an inferior film to the American version, and watching it today, I have to say that I was disappointed in this Japanese version of the film. I did like some of the added scenes they did with it, but all in all, I myself I'm going to be going off of the American or the dubbed cut for this review, as in that's the film I'm more familiar with, and the film I think is a better all-around movie of the two. Now, I seen this in theaters. I was 6 years old. This was just before I turned 7, and this was probably one of the first movies I seen in theaters. Might have been the first movie I seen in theaters, and I absolutely loved my theater experience. And this has been one of my favorites and my go-tos ever since. I know you said you also seen this in theaters. So what are your memories with this film?
Yeah, so I was it was a little bit after I turned 8, and my mom took me and my cousin to see it, and I'll admit it was a mostly empty theater, because I'm sure she picked a showtime that wasn't like peak Friday night or whatever. Not that this was a big box office hit anyway, but it was a pretty empty theater. I remember there was like an old couple that like made a joke about like liking Japanese giant lizards and jokes like that, but I loved it. I ate it up as a kid. I too also never saw the Japanese cut until this Blu-ray release, and while there are some films where I will make a case for defending the American versions of the movies, King of the Monsters, the American version of King Kong versus Godzilla, some of them where I grew up on the American versions more than the others. This is the one where I would say I outright and hands down 100% prefer the US version to the Japanese version, because it's not just about the editorial changes, because it drops something like 8 or 9 minutes about there of footage, which isn't a significant amount for a 107-minute movie to go to like a 99-minute movie. That's not like a dramatic, and it's a lot of little tiny moments. They don't like chop sequences out. It's a lot of like little bits here, little bits there, just punching up the pacing, which is good. But the big dramatic difference is that all of the sound design, if it's not entirely redone, it's mostly redone. And the Japanese cut has got to be one of the quietest and tamest sort of overall soundscapes and sound designs of darn near any Godzilla movie, or at least it seems like it. Maybe it's because I'm used to the American version that's got such a pumped up, beefed up, exciting set of sound design and sound effects, and then you watch the Japanese version, everything seems like you're watching a darn near silent movie half the time, you know. And then the additional pieces of music that they throw in, sometimes it's replacing the Japanese cues, and sometimes it's just additional where there was no music. And I love almost every time. I prefer the way the US cut does it to the Japanese cut. And like, it's weird because it's like the US version of Godzilla 2000 is easily, like, it might be one of my easily top 10 favorite Godzilla movies. Certainly one of the very best from the Suitmation first 50 years. But the Japanese cut, it's like Japanese cut's kind of like a very middle of the road kind of movie, and it just shows how much of a difference relatively few changes can make to how effective a movie is. You know, the dub has a lot of wit and a lot of charm to it, adds a lot of like fun and energy to the movie. The pacing is really good. The music always seems to hit at all the right moments. The sound design is just really just, you know, strong and powerful. Like the US cut is just like, it elevates it from that kind of B movie to that kind of like B plus, A minus kind of a feel to it, you know? So yeah, I love the US version, hands down, prefer it over the Japanese cut.
100% agree with you. They even changed like the ending credits music, you know, like in the American version, it's the Godzilla theme march. And
yeah, I think it's the
that title in the Japanese version.
Yeah, almost. And you know, they add in a few Akira Ifukube tracks that aren't in the Japanese cut, and I think all of them are welcome additions. You know, it's like you got to have that stuff in there, and I love it. You know.
Yeah, Godzilla, like in the Japanese version, I noticed that like he opens his mouth to roar a couple times and nothing comes out. It's almost silence. Like
Yep. From what I understand, like this is kind of hearsay and no like official reports, but from what I understand, you know, because this one was the Japanese cut was released just a year and a half after the release of Godzilla 98. So it was Godzilla 98 in May of 98, and then this was December of 99. So from what I understand, even in terms of Japanese Godzilla movie standards, this one was kind of put out on a relatively quick turnaround from the point that they decided they needed to bring back their Godzilla and do their own sort of modern take on Godzilla to when it was released. From what I understand, even this one was on a relatively quick turnaround. And so perhaps it's one of those things where it was kind of rushed, and where it was rushed might have been in sort of the post-production, editing, sound design kind of phase anyway. So then you know, when the US distributors get it to do their kind of US dub and US version of it, they're getting something that's a little bit rougher around the edges. So then they get to look at kind of the finished film or the rough cut of the film as it stood in the Japanese version. And then they get to, you know, trim up the pacing, you know, play around with the dialogue a bunch and redo the sound design and add and enhance the musical score. And so they just get to really like polish the movie up in a lot of ways. And it's like, and every single change and alteration they made had to be approved by Toho. Like, and it was a step-by-step process. Like, we want to do this, wait for Toho's approval. We want to do this, wait for Toho's approval. And everywhere outside of Japan, this is Toho's official international version of the movie. So like the director and Toho like did very much approve of and like this version of the film. So like, the way I see it, like it's got a stamp of approval that other US versions of Godzilla movies never got. And so like I see it like it's the superior version of the movie to me, and it's just hard for me. I can't really be convinced of anything otherwise. This is one where I'll draw that hard line.
Yeah, and there's just a couple things like that I noticed, like Orga's sounds are completely different, and which I heard they were. Like I said, I'd never seen it until today, and like the opening, like, you know, where they're looking into right before the main title pops up on the screen, like Godzilla just slightly closes his eye and opens it back up. And in the American dub version, you know, Godzilla roars right there as Godzilla 2000 comes across the screen. And in the Japanese version, it says, you know, Godzilla 2000 Millennium, and there's no roar. There's barely any music, and there's just subtle differences that like that that I think make the American version better. I want my Godzilla movie to be loud. I want him to roar, and I want there to be the Ipakube themes and new updated themes. And I
Yeah, and
don't, like you said, it's almost half of the movie is almost silent.
yeah, it's like even by because I mean we watch most of these Godzilla movies don't have their soundtracks or anything altered even when they get Americanized really. So it's like on all Godzilla movie standards like this is a shockingly quiet Godzilla movie just in a general soundscape and it's kind of weird. It feels like they didn't get to do a sort of final pass or something and it'll be interesting to go to the Millennium movies after this the films that didn't get any US versions and to see how the sound design and soundscape sounds there and maybe it was a situation where for the follow-up Millennium films they devoted a little bit more time to the sound design and things like that because in general Japanese movies don't go as heavy on the post-production sound design as American movies do. A lot of times, especially older Japanese movies, they would just kind of use almost the on-set recording of the ambience of the scene. They wouldn't go heavy into like giving everything a newly recorded sound design. Like you'll see characters in an American movie, like anytime someone's walking down like a hallway that's like a hard floor, you'll hear the click, click, click of their feet, if they're in a suit or something, like American movies are very heavy on sound design in general and Japanese movies aren't. But even by Godzilla movie standards, this is a very, very quiet Godzilla movie. And it's just odd because the American movie has such a Hollywood sound design to it.
Yeah, it does. It's loud and it lets itself be known, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I just don't know how many more times I can, the embellishments to the music, the editing decisions. I'm like very few moments or occurrences where I can say like, okay, I can kind of see what they were going for with the Japanese version, and I would maybe take this little bit or that little bit of footage. But the sound design and the musical changes, I'm all in favor of the U.S. version.
Well, let me get into some background of this film for you. Godzilla 2000 is a 1999 Japanese kaiju film directed by Takao Akawara, written by Hiroshi Kashiwabara and Wataru Mimura, produced by Shogo Tomiyama, and starring Takahiro Murata, Hiroshi Abe, Naomi Nishida, Mayu Suzuki, and Shira Sano. This was produced and distributed by Toho Studios, and it is the 24th film in the Godzilla franchise, as well as the first film in the franchise's Millennium era. The film was also the 23rd Godzilla film to be produced by Toho and was Toho's second reboot of the Godzilla franchise after the 1984 film The Return of Godzilla. The film, along with the subsequent Godzilla films in the franchise's Millennium era, ignores all continuity established by any previous films with the sole exception of the 1954 original. Godzilla 2000 was released in Japan on December 11th, 1999, and in North America on August 18th of 2000 by TriStar Pictures. This film received mostly mixed reviews from critics and performed below TriStar's expectations, grossing just over $10 million at the North American box office. And it was the last film in the franchise to receive a North American theatrical release until Shin Godzilla in 2016.
Yeah, which is wild. The dream scenario I always think about is like it would have been really fun and interesting to see the other Millennium Godzilla movies sort of Americanized in the same way that this one was. A world where this was like very, very successful in America, and so they decided to do that for all of the consecutive Millennium entries would have been really cool. It would be nice to see movies like GMK or the Mechagodzilla movies sort of given that kind of polish, with sound design and music and more professional dubbing that this movie got. It would be interesting to see that type of treatment to those films.
Absolutely. I mean, I love GMK's soundtrack, and I love most of the Millennium films. I do like. There's There's a couple that, parts of a couple that get under my skin, but once we get to those, I'm sure I can go on a little rant about them. But when it comes to this film, Godzilla 2000, I don't have too much bad to say about it. And once we get into characters and whatnot, I'm sure you'll be able to tell because I'll just be again a little fanboy about this film.
Yeah, and while we're in this kind of background information area, I want to point out that it's interesting that all of the Godzilla Millennium movies outside of this one are very sort of clear in laying out their sort of timeline or their relationship with or without any of the previous movies. Megaguirus has kind of a prologue showing all of Godzilla's appearances in that timeline. GMK is very clear that it references the 54 movie overtly and talks about it, and that Godzilla hasn't appeared since. The Kiryu movies or the Mecha Godzilla movies clearly lay out like what the timeline of that series has been. That you had Godzilla 54 and then Mothra and then like War of the Gargantuas and then these Godzilla films, and Final War is also the same thing. Talks about like its timeline and backstory. This is the one where it's always kept vague. Like they never mention 1954. They never mention when exactly Godzilla appeared. They never mentioned how long he's been around. They're making sort of discoveries and revelations about him in this movie that feel like you would think Godzilla would be relatively new. Like they get a skin sample, and it's as if nobody's ever gotten a skin sample from Godzilla before, or no one's ever analyzed it, and they discover like his regenerative properties and things like that. So it's interesting to me that this is like, it feels like a Godzilla sequel that doesn't have a proper origin, I guess, or a proper introduction, or it's kept kind of vague. And so like for me as a kid, the fun thing that I always had is like, for me, I'm like, I always pair it with Godzilla 98 in a weird way. I'm like, that hatchling like grew up and mutated and became stronger and like morphed into this Godzilla. And so like I just always in my mind, I know like officially they're not connected at all, but I think they make a great like double feature, especially the US version of Godzilla 2000. So like that's always been like my fun little, like, I don't do a lot of head canon and stuff like that, but I've always enjoyed like putting Godzilla 98 and this movie together as a double feature.
Yeah, and I mean, why not? I mean, it doesn't hurt anything. And when I was younger, I will tell you that I didn't notice that this Godzilla, the dubbed version, was a Toho film because of how the commercials for the trailer and stuff like that. I almost thought it was a sequel to the 98 film when I was very much younger, until I got into theaters and, you see on the screen like a Toho production and stuff like that. And it was like, oh, okay, so this is a standalone film, or is it a sequel to the Heisei era, or what is this?
Yeah, and I mean, not to play like fun word games, but I mean, it does have two in the title in a roundabout kind of way. It is called Godzilla 2000, and like that's just like movies where the third entry was in 3D. They would call it, Friday the 13th 3D. Like it feels like a play on Godzilla 2. And curiously enough, the U.S. version, the sound design uses a number of Godzilla 98's roars and growls. The folks who did this US version in like the audio commentary for this on the Blu-ray, they say like, oh no, we didn't use any of the 98 roars or sounds. We weren't even allowed to. But like there's YouTube clips that you can look up that like there are a lot of Godzilla 98 roars and sounds that they use to supplement the Godzilla sound design in the US version of the movie. So it's like even the roars kind of match. So like it's kind of one of those like threads that link the movies a little bit, So for me, like again, I'm not a crazy, oh my gosh, head canon this, head canon that, make up your own version of this, your own version of that. But for me, in my mind, like Godzilla 98 and Godzilla 2000, like they just go together, especially the US version of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there. And before we get into the rest of our conversation with some fun facts and numbers and all that, I am going to drop the trailer for Godzilla 2000, and I will be using the American trailer because I absolutely
is it the one with Super Beast in it?
absolutely it is.
Yeah, I remember the way you said that you weren't sure what movie it was either, because the trailers are like kind of edited in a deceptive way. And I remember all the way up until we watched the movie in the theaters, like before the movie started, my mom was like, I wonder if the voices are gonna, my mom like made a joke. She's like, I wonder if the voices are gonna match the lips in this movie, you know, like, because we didn't know if it was like a Japanese made movie or an American made movie, you know, because it was coming out in America. And then like we started watching it, we're like, oh, okay, you know.
Yeah, but I just love the trailer for this film because that Rob Zombie and Super Beast kicks in, and this trailer kicks ass. It's probably one of my favorite.
It was on brand at the time.
Absolutely. So I'll go ahead and I'll drop that in here, and we'll get into a plot synopsis, and we will be back right after that.
His power is unequaled. His battles are legendary. His return is near.
This could be the end of civilization.
Get ready
I've spotted him!
for the 23rd big screen appearance of the world's biggest star. Godzilla! From TriStar Pictures and Toho Company Limited. Catch the ultimate showdown
It's an alien!
where winner takes all. Godzilla 2000. If you can't take the heat, run.
Godzilla is a literal force of nature to Japan. The Godzilla Prediction Network functions independently to study the monster and predict its landfalls. Meanwhile, the scientists of Crisis Control Intelligence find a 60-million-year-old UFO deep in the Japan Trench. As CCI attempts to raise the UFO to study it, it takes off into the sky on its own. Godzilla arrives in a village and then battles the JSDF, now equipped with powerful full metal missiles. But the UFO appears, searching for genetic information that only Godzilla possesses. It fights Godzilla, driving the monster underwater, and then lands to replenish its solar power. Yuji Shinoda, the founder of the GPN, discovers the secret to Godzilla's regenerative properties, but so has the UFO. It frees itself from the JSDF's attempt to contain it and heads for Shinjuku. After landing atop Tokyo Opera City Tower, it begins to drain all the files about Godzilla from Tokyo's master computers. As it begins to alter the oxygen content of the surrounding atmosphere, CCI attempts to destroy the UFO using explosive charges, but Shinoda, attempting to find out more about the aliens, is nearly caught in the blast. He survives and joins his peers on a nearby rooftop, watching the UFO. Almost in response, the UFO broadcasts its message of invasion and creating a new empire on Earth, and Shinoda reveals that the aliens are after the regenerative properties contained inside Godzilla's DNA so that they may use it to reform their bodies. Godzilla arrives and again battles the UFO. However, Godzilla is subdued by the UFO's assault, and the UFO absorbs some of Godzilla's DNA, which the aliens use to reform themselves outside the spaceship as the gigantic Millennium. However, the Millennium is unable to control Godzilla's genetic information in the DNA and mutates into a horrible monster named Orga. Godzilla recovers and brings down the UFO before fighting Orga, but Orga, having absorbed the regenerative properties of Godzilla's DNA, is highly resistant to injury. Orga retaliates and extracts more of Godzilla's DNA in order to become a perfect clone. Godzilla breaks free and sets Orga ablaze with its atomic breath attack. But Orga re-emerges and attempts to swallow Godzilla whole. As Orga begins to transform, Godzilla charges the nuclear pulse and unleashes it, vaporizing Orga's entire upper body and killing it. Mitsuo Katagiri, head of CCI, dies when Godzilla partially destroys the roof of the building where he, Shinoda, and the authorities were observing the battle. Those remaining on the roof reminisce on how Godzilla was wrought by human ambition, prompting Shinoda to suggest that Godzilla exists in us all, as Godzilla begins rampaging through Tokyo.
All right, we are back, and we're going to dive into some numbers on Godzilla 2000. So Godzilla 2000 was produced on a budget of approximately $8.3 million. None of these numbers are adjusted for inflation yet again. The film grossed 1.65 billion yen, or roughly about 15 million during its box office run, with approximately 2 million ticket admissions. TriStar hoped that the film would gross no worse than anywhere between 12 and 15 million in North American theaters, but the film eventually only grossed 10 million in North American theaters. Rotten Tomatoes has this film at a 57% based on 69 reviews, with an average rating of 5.68 out of 10, which, I mean, it's a little low. I mean, clearly,
Yeah,
they were
because
getting tired of Godzilla.
well, yeah, well, and also, like this was released more. It was given more of a prominent release in America. So where some of the Godzilla movies get high scores because there's not very many reviews, this one probably got scored by a wider range of critics, and so they just did that sort of harsh B movie judgment on it, and it's a shame because this is like peak Godzilla. So they
I
can go
mean,
to
if you're
hell.
going to ask me, I'd probably give the film on the low end an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, yeah, legitimately. Like I love it to death.
Yeah, this is we'll get into the monster design and stuff, but this film is it has always been in my top 10 for the Godzilla franchise. I will say that.
Agreed.
This film is rated a 41 out of 100 on Metacritic based on 23 reviews, 6 out of 10 on IMDb. 88% of Google users liked this film,
That's
and
more like it.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
We
that's more
we
like
got
it.
a B plus rating.
Those Chad Google review users.
Absolutely. All you got to do is click a thumbs up, and we got a rating.
Exactly.
Godzilla's on screen for 22 minutes and 28 seconds, or 23% of the film. And his first
That's
appearance is bright and early at just about 3.5 minutes into the film.
yeah, ladies and gentlemen, this is the blueprint. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. You get Godzilla in about a quarter of your movie and you've hit the jackpot.
Yeah, and I like the characters in this film. They're almost like Godzilla chasers, like they're like storm chasers. So
Yeah.
even when Godzilla's not on screen, again, we're hearing about him, or they're making his presence known with their little like sensors and stuff in their car.
Yeah, yeah, and from what I understand, the English dub they tried to make sure to work him into the dialogue even more when it goes on a stretch of the movie where he's not really present, because there is kind of like a middle section of the movie where he's not super present. So like they said that they intentionally tried to do that, try to make some of the dialogue and things like that mention him and keep him on the minds of the viewers. And I think this one, in terms of just like the overall kind of Godzilla blueprint, like this is just like a great sort of, because it's not really a sequel to anything. You can kind of come in cold to this Godzilla movie as a non-fan, as a whatever, and like I think it's a great like gateway drug Godzilla movie because it's kind of like a quintessential Godzilla movie in terms of how it's executed, how it's shown off. It's semi-modern. It's not a very old sort of tacky movie. It's not a goofy movie. It's not doing like ridiculous things in it. Even the portrayal of like an alien invader is handled in like a pretty realistic way. There's another giant monster in the movie because it kind of comes from Godzilla, like using his cells to create a monster. So like it's like, as far as a Godzilla movie goes, it's about as grounded as it could be handled. And like it kind of does like a great job of, you get like three really big Godzilla scenes kind of equally dispersed throughout the movie. You get like the opening sort of chase sequence, and then you get the big battle with the military that transitions to a battle with the UFO, and then you get the big third act. It's kind of like almost the perfect formula. So, I think there's a lot to love about this Godzilla movie.
And I 100% agree with you. Like you said, you get Godzilla bright and early. You wait 15, 20 minutes or so, and you still have the parts with the UFO to keep you busy. And then you got Godzilla again, like you said, fighting with the military and then the UFO. And then for the next 20, 25 minutes, you have the UFO keeping you busy again, where it's like it's going into town, landing on the building, destroying the building, and then keeping the army busy. And then here comes Godzilla again, and you got the fight with the UFO, and then you got Orga and the fight with Orga. So I mean, this is a fantastic formula for a Godzilla film, and clearly Chris and I both love this Godzilla film. And if you haven't seen it, you have to watch it. Even if you're not a Godzilla fan, give it a try for an hour and a half. What's an hour and a half of your life for a movie?
Exactly. And it's got this great, the third act is great because it's a really kind of prolonged extended battle, but they do a great job of having sort of multiple stages of the battle that create variation. First it's just Godzilla and the UFO, then you sort of see the initial form of Orga that then uses the Godzilla cells to become its proper form, and then it's sort of Orga and Godzilla, and then it raises the UFO up to kind of get involved in the battle a bit. So it's just got these sort of stages of progression that work really well.
Yeah, I don't know what in the world that first design of Orga was, like the little tentacle,
Yeah,
almost
I always
octopus looking type thing.
yeah, the alien in the movie kind of strikes me as like a really unique kind of concept for an alien, because it either it either like doesn't have a set physical form, or it has the ability to sort of, I don't know, exist in this sort of non-physical form, because it's essentially one alien being inhabiting this vessel. So it's like this unique kind of alien where, to theorize here, it goes into sort of a liquefied form, and encases itself in that vessel to travel the world, or travel the universe, the galaxy. And then I guess when it lands, it sort of examines the beings on the planet to find the most dominant being on the planet, and then assimilates their cells to kind of adapt its own physical form to that planet, and sort of then dominate and take over that planet. And like we see it looking at humans DNA, and like the human DNA doesn't really got what it deems necessary, I suppose. And then it looks into Godzilla's DNA, and it kind of sees that sort of hyper regenerative property that it has. So, and they say in the film that it uses Godzilla's DNA to adapt to the atmosphere and the Earth's, like chemical atmosphere. And so it's like I always kind of perceived the tentacle monster as kind of like the pure version of the Orga, and then it uses the Godzilla cells to kind of become the sort of like able to survive properly on Earth version. Or they talk also that it's trying to become a Godzilla clone, and as it absorbs some more cells, some more of Godzilla later, it's sort of morphing into more of a Godzilla look. So it's like it's almost like it's trying to become a complete Godzilla replicate. So it's this whole interesting dynamic, and it's a really really unique concept for an alien in a giant monster movie, if you ask me.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask you what you thought the alien was seeing when it looked into like the human DNA, and then like how Godzilla's DNA was almost like a single cell when it got all the way like zoomed in inside of Godzilla. I was going to ask you your thoughts on that, but you kind of just answered it with like the regenerative property of Godzilla himself.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what it seems like they get at, in the US version of the movie. When they discover that in Godzilla's cells, they call it Regenerator G1. In the Japanese version of the movie, it's called Organizer G1. And it makes more sense. Like, organize isn't really the right term for what it does, because it's like a regenerative property. They damage the cell, and then you see the cell like instantly heal. So like it's definitely like Regenerator G1 is a more appropriate name for it. But it's funny because the I listened to the audio commentary for the movie, and they talk about how when Orga shows up later, they're like, yeah, this thing's called Orga. We're assuming that's short for organism. It's like, no, dude, it's short for Organizer G1 because that's the Japanese name of the regenerator G1. You know, like it's like you guys are the guys that like helped make the American version of this, and like you're really like you're kind of like thick on some of these points. It's like they called it the Organizer G1 in Japan, so hence the creature that comes from it is called Orga for short. You know, it's like Regenerator G1 makes more sense, but like that's where Orga comes from as a name. You know, so yeah, it's interesting.
It is. It all adds up to something, and I like how the American version explains it. And I thought I'd get your thoughts on that, and I'm glad you dove deep on that one.
Yeah, as a kid, I always hated it as a kid if they don't say the name of the monster in the movie. Like as an adult, it doesn't bother me, but as a kid, I was like, man, I hate that it's called Orga and no one ever calls it Orga in the movie. Like I absolutely hated that as a kid. It was my OCD, you know.
I've always been one of those people that like when they say the name of the movie in the movie, it's always like I used to watch a lot of Cinema Sins, so it's like when he's like, "Oh, roll credits."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, I don't need the name of the movie said in the movie, but like I always like you know, as a kid, I'm like these monsters have names. Like, why don't they call the monsters their names in the movies? So I was always on board of like any contrived reasoning behind calling the monsters their names in any monster movie. Dude, kick us with some more fun facts. Let's get all that, and then we'll go into our discussion about the movie.
I'm always kicking. I always got some facts for you that
Yeah,
I find fun.
yeah. Let's do it.
Regarding Godzilla's design in this, director Takao Okawara wanted to make something new and noted that Godzilla's height has changed over the years, stating that he felt that distance between human beings and Godzilla was too much. So he reduced his height back to something closer to the original at approximately 170 feet in this film. And the basic design of this suit was modeled heavily after the King Goji suit from 1962's King Kong vs. Godzilla.
You kind of see that too. I do love this, like this suit. Not to, I mean, we're kind of almost stepping into monster design here, so maybe I'll just hold my tongue for some of that then. But we'll get to the monster design on it.
Oh yeah, we're both gonna have a lot to say there. This is the only Godzilla film in the Millennium series not released in the 2000s, besides the American edit.
Yeah. Just another reason to like the U.S. version better. It lived up to the name.
Absolutely. The true identity of this version of Godzilla in the film has remained a mystery ever since Godzilla 2000 was released. Unlike any other Godzilla before him, no explanation for his existence is ever discussed in the film. And some fans believe that this Godzilla is Godzilla Jr. following the events from Godzilla vs. Destroya.
I mean, that's not a terribly like. Look, I'm not here to crap on anyone's fan theories and whatnot. I was just inundating everyone with my headcanon. But like the tone of these movies, and like, you know, the most advanced military thing they have in this movie is like those special missiles. And then when you look at the way the Heisei movies were, they had freeze rays and super X's and mecha Godzillas and stuff. It's like the style and the tone of this movie does not feel very in any way consistent with the very sort of comic book style that you were getting with the Heisei movie. So it's like, I'm not here to crap on anyone who wants to connect it to those movies, but it's like maybe you could connect it to like 84 and Biolante before those Heisei movies get a little wild. Like you could maybe kind of see like after Biolante, like this being like 10 years after that, and you know, and it kind of like work into that, you know, because that was another movie that dealt a lot with like Godzilla cells and Godzilla regenerating and things like that, you know, and a creature kind of being created out of mixing with Godzilla cells and stuff. But it's like this doesn't really jive with the larger Heisei series.
Yeah, and I've always liked to think, you know, like in some down the road, you know, what's the word I'm looking for?
Iteration.
Timeline.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
like down the road timeline of Godzilla, like that this is Godzilla Jr. from Godzilla vs. Destroya, because there was so much nuclear energy and radiation from the adult Godzilla in that film melting down, that's why his spines in this film are so large
Yeah,
and
and
whatnot.
it's a little different version. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not here to crap on anybody's parade or anything, but it's just like, I mean, it's just like like there's no like this is a much more grounded kind of movie than what you were getting with the Heisei movies, That's all.
Yeah, it's only got an alien in it.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Only an alien. I'm talking about the super tech, the human super tech.
no, absolutely. I get 100% where you're coming from. Just had to give you a hard time.
No, it's okay. And like I said, I used to do that as a kid too. I just kind of thought like the idea of it being a grown up junior is like super awesome. Like, because he's not like super hostile towards humanity. So like the characterization of Godzilla not being overtly like evil, like I dig that. Like, and believe me, no, I would love nothing more than to get like a proper like Godzilla Jr. grown up kind of a Heisei throwback movie. But it's like, as fun as it is, it's like it's hard to kind of justify it when you analyze the movie. But everyone should have their fun with it, because this is the Godzilla sequel with no origin movie. So as far as I'm concerned, people should tack it on to whatever they want to.
Yep. Anywhere from this film could be a starting point, anywhere from previous Godzilla films. So whatever you believe, we won't knock it.
Yeah, 100%.
These next two fun facts we kind of already hit on, but this is the last Godzilla film to receive a theatrical run in North America until Legendary Pictures Godzilla in 2014. And then this was the last Japanese Godzilla film to receive a theatrical run in North America until Shin Godzilla in 2016. And then the last one I have is the American trailers for Godzilla 2000 featured the song Super Beast by Rob Zombie. So those two we had already hit on.
Yeah. What a perfect trailer for 2000s America.
Just glad we didn't have like a Backstreet Boys song on here or something.
Oh gosh. Don't even, let's not go down that road.
All right. I'll take you down a different road, and we'll go with, who was your favorite character in Godzilla 2000?
Not an easy decision, surprisingly. I think this is one of the stronger human casts that any Godzilla movie has had. It's got interesting protagonists that are doing a very, I love the idea of making them sort of Godzilla chasers. So they're like, there's an in-universe reason that they're very like obsessed with and following Godzilla. I think even like the human antagonist, quotation marks, it's like threading a good needle on exactly how antagonistic a human could even be in a Godzilla movie. It's not like you're going to have this mustache twirling villain that's just like doing evil things. It's like, no, it's like he's just more overtly anti-Godzilla, and our heroes are a little bit more pro-Godzilla living, and Godzilla's kind of not really a villain. So, he's sort of a dynamic character because but if I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be Shinoda. It's actually the lead of the movie. I just like his I just like his style. He's just an interesting character, a unique protagonist for a movie like this. Sort of the embodiment of the kind of Professor Yamane from the original 54 Godzilla, where he understands that Godzilla is a threat and must be sort of dealt with, but at the same time he's interested in reaping all of the scientific knowledge and learning about this unique creature, and not killing him, not just overtly killing him, but just trying to deal with him in another way. So I like the Shinoda character for that.
I would have to second that because I chose him as my favorite character as well. I like the Godzilla chasers. I like how they do that. They got the Godzilla Protection Network, and they're trying to predict where he's going to land next, and just trying to prevent chaos from erupting from him hitting landfall and coming into the city. They're trying to let the military know, like, hey, this is where he's predicted to land next, like set up there and kind of like deter him away, get him back into the water, like keep him off land so we don't have this problem. And he was an easy character to like because he was all about his daughter. You know, he brought his daughter with him everywhere, got her in the network with him. And so, I mean, there was two things in the film that he cared about, and it was Godzilla and his daughter. And it's like, hey, I I can agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And he's, he gets, and we're referring more so to the American version, but I mean, he gets a great line, well, maybe one of us has that in dialogue, so we won't talk about it, but I mean, he's just like, the humor in this movie is really well done. The dialogue in this movie is like, the dub dialogue is like a lot of fun. Like, he's a really interesting character. A lot of the banter and dynamics between the human cast is just really well handled in this movie.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't have a lot bad to say about it. So I mean, there's a couple little funny lines in here that I'll give some crap to once we hit quote. But I will give you my favorite Godzilla or my score from this Godzilla film. And I have a favorite, but I did want to throw out an honorable mention for like the ending. It's almost the ending theme when Godzilla's walking away, and when the camera's on him, it's silent besides the music. But then you flip back to the human characters and you hear them talking, and it was called Dreaded God, and that sounded something like this. I'm sure you'll recognize it.
No, that's a great track, and it was a great decision to kind of pull out all of the sound design and sound effects for that, and you just hear the music and the sort of dialogue kind of clean in the track. And hearing it there, like, it almost gives me like proto Halo theme vibes, but with a female sounding vocalist instead of a male vocalist. Like, just hearing it there, I'm like, oh, it's almost Halo vibes, with that style of vocalization.
Yeah, and I mean, I like how they set up that scene. You know, they're talking about in the American dub. You know, a scientist produced this monster, Godzilla, and it's showing him destroying the town and walking away. And it's almost like they feel sorry for him and are appreciating that he keeps protecting them, and they're finally trying to understand him instead of just destroy him. But if I was going to choose something from this, it would have to be the Godzilla march, the Godzilla theme in this film. It's literally the ringtone from this film on my phone. I could jam all day long.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's great. I enjoy, like, I'm not so keen on the names and tracks of exactly what's unique to the Japanese cut and what was added to the American cut. I love the music throughout the movie. I do enjoy the sort of unique Godzilla theme done for this film. I don't know the particular name of the track, but it's that sort of dun 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 kind of a, I'm doing a poor rendition of it there, but but you hear it when the main title pops up on screen. And I don't know, it's a good track, but I mean, there's a lot of really like moments of the score that shine throughout it. You're thinking of some of the military music and the themes behind like the UFO. Like there's just a lot of like this is a well composed Godzilla movie, and so there's a lot to pick from.
Yeah, I like listening to soundtracks and stuff while I'm at work, so I always will throw these soundtracks on the phone and listen to them once or twice throughout the week before we record, and kind of play the movie in my head as I'm listening to it, I guess, and then decide like, all right, which soundtrack is my favorite here.
Yeah, and I've got a little bit of a fun fact about the composer of this film, actually, that you might be surprised by.
Shoot.
So the composer of the film is Takayuki Hattori, and this is not the only Godzilla film that he composed. He was also the composer for Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, as well as the Godzilla anime trilogy that was done in recent years of Planet of the Monsters, City on the Edge of Battle, and The Planet Eater. And it's if you say that, it's not overtly obvious, but when you hear some of the tracks in Godzilla 2000, you kind of think of Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. You can kind of see that there is a bit of a musical sort of there's a degree of like where you can kind of hear that's like, yeah, it does sound like it's part of the same kind of soundscape a little bit. You can understand that it's work from the same composer. I strongly prefer the Godzilla 2000 score to Space Godzilla, but I mean, it's interesting that this is a composer that has 5 Godzilla films under their belt.
Yeah, you would never think that, but I agree with you on that one as well. That I prefer this to Space Godzilla. I mean, I'm not knocking Space Godzilla on this episode, but when it comes to score, I just did not enjoy a lot from that soundtrack, and I definitely enjoy more from this than I did that one.
Yeah, and someone on people have talked about how this composer is kind of good at like doing musical score for kind of like pretty and beautiful things. Like you think about when they're looking at the cells through the microscopes, and like you're seeing like it's like this whimsical kind of musical score. Like this composer is very good at doing that sort of like delicate pretty stuff, if you will. And I believe you've never seen the anime trilogy, but I mean, you kind of see that, you kind of notice that, like you think about Space Godzilla and some of the kind of pretty music that it had in certain moments, and it's like, yeah, this composer has a certain kind of a style.
I have never seen the anime trilogy, but about what, 8 more films, and I'll be digging into them.
We'll get there. Not my. I don't know if they're anyone's favorite Godzilla movies, but they're interesting. That's for sure. They're interesting.
And just like the rest of these films, everything's a little different.
Yep, exactly.
Well, I will go ahead. I'll give you my favorite quote, and I chose just a simple little cheesy quote from Shinoda. And there was a couple that I could have chose, and don't ask me why I went with this one. I think it was just the music, and with the scene, I chose him saying, Godzilla exists inside each one of us. Right before Godzilla just lays waste with his atomic heat ray to the city, and that just hit me as it gave me a little chuckle, because he's like 100% got Godzilla's back, and then he just does a 180 of just heat ray all over the city, and that gave me a little chuckle.
Yeah, and I think it's a, it was always a kind of perplexing thing to think about when I was a kid. I'm like, what the heck is he talking about? Godzilla's inside each one of us, but it's sort of a deeper metaphor, in terms of like the potential to destroy, or like to harm, or to not harm, like the potential to destroy the planet with the power we have or not, like that, like it's more of a, like, Godzilla has something in common with all of us. We all have that kind of destructive power. Godzilla's a representation of what we, humanity, have kind of unleashed upon the world with nuclear technology and things like that. I think it speaks more to the potential for humankind to do great and terrible things, as they say. And yeah, so yeah, I think that's kind of more like where it's going along the meaning. They're like, why does he keep protecting this? It's like, well, Godzilla's a living creature, and he sort of recognizes humanity as living creatures, and they're just trying to, you know he's trying to exist on this world just like we're trying to exist on this world. So he wants to kind of like live and let be, and maybe, that's kind of a signal for humanity to do the same thing. So it's an interesting line. It's a little tacky, a little wonky, but I mean, it it lands if you kind of think about it. The uh the line that I chose was, uh I mean, there's a lot of great humorous lines, but the line that I chose that's on the more serious side is, when he says, "You really call this civilization? Anything we don't understand, we try to destroy." And it's like that's the Godzilla franchise in a nutshell, very much there in terms of what it thinks of humanity. Anything new and different and dangerous, it's just we got to kill it. So, that's the whole, mantra behind the humans that are always trying to kill Godzilla in these movies. So I picked that one.
Yeah, and I like that one too. And I mean, you could even go back to that line makes me think of like James Cameron, like his film Aliens. They got these new xenomorphs, and you got people who are like, no, we can't kill them, we have to study them, and they're like, are you kidding me? Like, I get it's a new species, but these things could wipe us out. Like, we're killing them. Like, there's
Yeah,
no
exactly.
questions asked.
Yeah, and I mean, there's also like that's ironic. It woke up after 60 million years, and Godzilla destroyed it the very next day. Like this movie, it has a lot of great lines like that. And of course the iconic, after Shinoda survives the explosion in the building, when he goes, "Nice try, asshole." Like that's like, how do you not love the guy after he delivers a line like that?
Yeah, that I love that line. Or even making him more of a bad guy, where he's like, looks like I'm gonna have to send more flowers.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Just there's just a lot of great banter. I like what she's talking about, when Yuki, she delivers the film, and the editors kind of like trash talking her. He's like, Godzilla's radiation fogged the film, next time don't get so close. He goes, go and get some more, and she's like, not another joyride with those freaks. And he's like, quit your bitching. Like, things like that. It's just like there's just a lot of great lines of dialogue. These missiles will go through Godzilla like crap through a goose. There's just a lot of like, there's a lot of really fun sort of like great sort of grade A B movie kind of like monster fun humor, witty banter. Like when when she's taking photos, and he's like, "You sure you still got film in the camera?" Or and he turns the windshield wipers on even though the windshield's been destroyed. Like there's just a lot of good stuff like that in this movie, and I just really enjoy it.
Yep, there's a lot of little banter, like you said. What is this? The imbecile rate? Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
there,
Exactly.
there's there, you'll get some good chuckles through this film.
Yeah, and the villain has such a good voice in the dub, when he says lines like, "And in the meantime, he just levels Tokyo," like he just sounds cool. And so like there's just, it's an easy on the ears audio track, that is for sure.
It is. This is for the voices that they chose. This is probably one of my favorite dubs in the series. It also helps that it's one of my favorite films in general.
Yeah, and I mean, well, and this is like, this is Sony doing their own professional dub, and actually, there are a couple of voices in this movie that like they're actors that have been in films and things like that. It's not what usually happens with the Heisei Millennium movies, which is that Toho ships it to, I think, like a Hong Kong dubbing company, and they just kind of do this kind of dry read of the dub, and you're hearing the same, half a dozen voices over. You get like generic female protagonist voice and like generic older guy voice and generic younger guy voice, and if you watch the Heisei Millennium movies in a row and you watch them all dub, like you recognize the same 6 or 7 voices across a lot of those movies.
Absolutely. And if you can literally point out, I mean, there's a couple of characters in the Heisei era that have the same recurring voice, but you can definitely point out other ones like, oh, his voice was this guy in the last movie, and
Exactly.
I don't mind that, but this is definitely a nice dubbing of a Godzilla film.
Yeah, it would have been very cool to see, the Heisei and Millennium films all get, maybe not necessarily re-edited and enhanced sound design and enhanced music, but at least to get this level of dub would have been very nice.
For sure. Give them all the same kind of love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Chris, we'll go into favorite scene quick. I'll let you go first on this one, on what your favorite scene was in the film.
It's tough. It's scene/sequence, I suppose, but I had to go with the sort of middle section of Godzilla versus the military that then transitions into Godzilla versus the UFO. To me, that is just kind of like peak quintessential Godzilla movie. It starts off with Godzilla coming ashore and taking everything that the military has to throw at him. They come with the choppers, they come with the jets, they come with the tanks. Then they have their special weapon that they drop on him, the special missiles that seem to be doing more damage, but they ultimately don't really stop him. And then, it transitions into kind of the other iconic Godzilla trope, which is pitting him against some kind of other fantastical creature or adversary, and the UFO flies in and it blasts Godzilla and just kind of totally curb stomps him a little bit. And it's like, that is just Godzilla in a nutshell in like a 10-minute sequence for me.
That's a good scene in the film. And that scene makes me think of a good quote from the film from one of the guys where they're in the military tent and they're like, is it dangerous to mankind? And he's like, it's dangerous to Godzilla, that's for sure.
yeah, exactly. Like, and there's like another great line when they're like, a visitor from outer space, it's just too crazy to believe. And he's like, yeah, like Godzilla's normal, It's like, that's almost a commentary on any Godzilla movie that people want to depict as being like too goofy or too weird or too silly or whatever. It's like, yeah, like you're saying this about a Godzilla movie,
Yeah, it's almost like this movie is self-aware of itself, and I love that.
Yeah, it's certainly the dub pokes fun at that a little bit,
Well, my favorite scene in this film, I would have to say, is Godzilla's entrance to the city when he's coming out of the bay, and they're like, Godzilla's entered the bay, and he comes out and the UFO shuts all the lights off, and it's got like his own light beams that are like triggering over the city, like one row or like layer at a time. Mm-hmm. And you got the Godzilla march or Godzilla theme kicking in, and he's just walking towards the UFO. And Shinoda's like, there's only one thing on Godzilla's mind right now. And every time I hear that as a kid, I was like, yeah, he's going to kick that UFO's ass.
Yeah. And it does, they do a little bit of editing in the US version where he says there's only one thing on his mind, and it cuts to Godzilla's close up as the music kicks in. And it's like, oh yeah, it's just like such a hell yeah moment. It's like, he's here to kick some ass. Like, it's such a good moment. He gets a sort of, championship walk down the aisle. We walk into the ring kind of a moment. There's a great visual gag where he's walking through a green light. The traffic light is green and Godzilla's walking through it. Like it's just fun stuff like that. It's like, it's just like good stuff. It's like they don't take a minute to poke fun at it, but it's just like classic. That's just good monster movie stuff. As a kid, I just absolutely ate all that stuff up.
Oh, I still eat it up every time, it, like you said, it switches to the close up on Godzilla's face, and that that Godzilla march kicks in, and it shows him just stumbling his way through the city. It's like, all right, here we go. He's got his entrance to WrestleMania, and here we go.
Yeah, and one thing that I kind of wanted to talk about, maybe a few of the minor edits between the Japanese and U.S. version. Like there's one where like one key one that was in the sequence that I just mentioned was there's a bit where Godzilla was facing the military and he started to charge up his blast, and then the jets all fly in and shoot him before he fires his blast off. They edited that out because I guess there was a perception that people were going to think they edited out him firing the blast. So they kind of edited around it to not show him charging it up. But like the implication in the Japanese version was that they shoot all the missiles at him from the jets to keep him from firing his atomic blast. And then but in the American version, they're like, well, he charges up and then he doesn't fire it, so let's just not have the moment where he charges it up. And they save him charging it up for when he faces the UFO, and I love when he fires it on the UFO because he kind of like whips his head in this really cool way right when he unleashes the breath, and so it's just, I don't know, it's a great moment. It's an interesting little edit where it's like, I understand the logic behind them cutting it, but it's like if you played it the right way, the implication was that the military was shooting missiles at him to stop him from fully charging and unleashing his breath.
Yeah, I did notice that there was. I like doing this little cut comparison. I like you going ahead and going into it, and I like hearing the differences. Even though I just watched it and seen the differences, it's still fun to see. But I love Godzilla's heat ray in this.
Absolutely.
I love the red. I mean, we can get into it in monster design if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, we can transition right to monster design right now if you want to.
Absolutely.
So, Godzilla himself, I think it's a great design. He's officially green for the first time, which is very interesting. He does have a little bit more of that lizard look that they talk about. I never really thought about it much, but when they talk about like King Kong versus Godzilla, it's like, yeah, like in terms of the way the kind of mouth and jaw is kind of shaped a little bit and things like that, like it is a bit more lizard-esque, going overtly green, going purple with the spines, and going for a breath that isn't a fire breath, but it is not the classic blue, and it definitely has a bit more of a fiery breath effect. It almost feels like in a lot of ways this was Toho saying like, hey, you can do a kind of modernization of Godzilla that reinterprets things in a bit more of a grounded way while still being very true to Godzilla. Like you can make him green like everyone always thought he was anyway, and you can give him a sort of more fiery and realistic breath and give him a more lizard design without totally transforming it the way they did in the 98 movie.
Yeah, I love this Godzilla design. I mean, he's more sleek. Everything about him is sharper. He's got the jagged teeth sticking out of his mouth. The spines are massive. And I love like almost like the purple fade they have to him. That continues into Mega Gearus. I love the roar design. It's kind of not a little grittier, but I can't think of the exact word for it, but it's
a little more animalistic, I suppose.
Yes, he has a little bit. He has a wider range of roars in this one. There we go.
Yeah, which again, this film has. If you're listening to the Japanese version versus the U.S. version, I don't know if they removed all of the Japanese versions of the roars. I think it's more supplemental. So you've got the Japanese roars, and then they created some new stuff for this film, and then some of what they used was also roars from the 98 Godzilla. So it's an interesting sort of soundscape. And I mean, of all the things Godzilla 98 did wrong and right, I mean, I think the roars were perfectly good and perfectly satisfying sound design. for Godzilla 98. So I have no qualms about them incorporating a number of those into this movie, even if they don't own up to it. They totally did it. You can find the clips on YouTube. But like I'm all for that. I think the roar, the soundscape of Godzilla is great in this movie.
Yeah, and I love that when he does get ready to blow his atomic breath, that the flames come out of the side of his mouth before he releases it.
Yeah, it's sort of a burst, I like that as well. Like it's a great, to finally go into a CGI effect for the breath instead of the sort of the animated effect they'd done previously.
Absolutely. This just is, I mean, this is probably in my top 5 Godzilla designs of all time. I absolutely love this.
And it's a shame, I think, we have a lot of fun with the Sun kind of anthology series that the Millennium series is, but man, this movie could have easily could have been a trilogy or like 3 to 5 films where this sort of launched the continuity. I could see a scenario where the characters from this movie carried over for a couple of movies, like where this laid the groundwork. Like it just, I feel like it was such a missed opportunity to see this design and these characters like continue on in a more substantial way, because I feel like it just could have led to some really awesome stuff, some direct sequels to this movie, be it Japanese or otherwise,
Absolutely. I would have loved for them to continue and then maybe like get into an origin story for this Godzilla in a film or two.
Yeah, maybe one of the sequels could have kind of dove in to a sort of backstory or history of Godzilla. It could have been really cool. TriStar almost made an American sequel to this movie called Godzilla Reborn. The team that helped that oversaw the Americanization of this movie, he wrote a script for Godzilla Reborn that would have had cameos from Shinoda and the other scientist character. They would have made a cameo in it. It sounded so much fun. It was going to take place in Hawaii, so it would have an international American and Japanese cast. Godzilla would have fought this sort of volcano bat creature. He would have been knocked into a coma halfway through and then revived, so hence the Godzilla Reborn thing. It would have been a sort of, they were going to use Toho's suitmation people and their practical effects for the miniatures and the suit and everything. And it would, but the CGI and the post-production, the editing, the sound work would have been handled, and it would have been an American production, but used Toho's production team for all of the monster physical effects, and then been finished CGI post-production as an American movie. And it just sounded so damn fun, and it's such a shame that sequel never got made.
Yeah, that sounds like something I would want to see. I hadn't read that about a sequel to this. I heard about it, but I didn't know the details like that.
Oh yeah, it's almost got an episode's worth of discussion that you could have just on it. I don't want to derail us, but it just had a lot of great ideas, such as so for example, one of them, there's an actor whose name's Steve Martin. He's been in a number of comedy movies and he has a long career. He's named Steve Martin, coincidentally the same name as Raymond Burr's character in the original Godzilla King of the Monsters. So they were going to have fun with that, and who knows if it would have happened, but their plan was to have the actor Steve Martin play a character who was a Godzilla expert named Raymond Burr. So then you would be inverting the original King of the Monsters, where you had actor Raymond Burr playing a character named Steve Martin. They were going to have an actor, Steve Martin, play a character named Raymond Burr. And that would have been really fun. The movie seemed like it was going to be loaded with stuff like that. And that would have been so much fun.
Yeah. And I mean, again, we would have loved to see it, but of course that fell through.
Yeah. Toho approved of the script and everything, but it was some Sony executive that after Spider-Man was a big hit was we don't make mid-budget movies anymore. We don't make these small things. I'm in the Spider-Man business. And it's damn, it would have been exceptional. To imagine the idea of an American produced sequel to an American version of a Toho movie. And if Toho had also made their own sequels to Godzilla 2000, it's could it have been one continuity being shared by Toho and TriStar and Sony? it's just like it would have been a very wild and different version of the Millennium series, and it would have been so much fun to see.
Any different continuity of Godzilla, we're always ready for it. So
Yeah, yeah.
it absolutely would have been fun.
Not to take us on a tangent there. What do you think of the UFO Orga Millennium kind of design?
The UFO, the rock version is what can you say about it? It looks like a giant rock, but once it, I guess, sheds kind of its rock form, I do like the UFO, how like pristine and shiny it looks, how like it actually looks like a legit UFO. Like,
Yeah, I like
but
that it's sort of like one enclosed piece.
no, but it's I wish we could have possibly seen like an inside of it or something. But I mean, it comes out and it kicks Godzilla's ass right away. But I don't have a lot to say about the UFO, so I'll let you go ahead. And
I mean, the thing that it always kind of like it feels like if you've seen the original War of the Worlds, the UFOs kind of have this shape that's very similar to this UFO, only they have like an extra like antenna extension on them. But, like it feels like aesthetically something out of a 1950s sci-fi movie. Like it evokes the feeling of the old War of the Worlds 1950 UFOs, and so I always liked it for that. It feels like kind of retro, and I dig that a lot.
absolutely. Now, when it comes to Orga, I love the design of Orga. I used to use him as a character on Godzilla Save the Earth and on the Xbox, and Godzilla Destroy All Monsters on the GameCube. And I absolutely enjoyed Orga.
On Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee for the GameCube, I unapologetically used Orga as my main because he was very like OP. He had like a very long reach with his claws, and his sort of special attack, I think it was called like the Rage attack or something. It was this great kind of he would spam his shoulder cannon in a lot of directions, and then he would do this little shockwave at the end of it. So like you were almost always guaranteed to get your opponent with that special attack. There was almost no way to get out of one or the other of it. And so yeah, Orga was my main on Destroy All Monsters Melee.
Yeah, I like Orga. There's a lot you can say about him. His design, he's got the big, almost like hands that are just ready to pummel you, but like he can't really do much with them. It's not like he can grab you and stuff like that. They're kind of stiff, and I'm guessing that's just kind of how the suit was. But I mean, when his mouth opens and expands, and then he's got like almost like a second mouth inside of it that can like encase you inside of it and like transform himself. It almost like adapts your features once you go inside of it. It was just a crazy creature design. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah. It's initially like a very a tentacly CGI monster, and then it morphs into a suitmation character. I like the idea that it's certainly it's a budgetary thing. They weren't going to have Godzilla fight a fully CGI creature, but I like to feel that it's a bit of a statement of like, yeah, CGI is a thing, but we still like suitmation. This is one of those movies made in that sweet spot where you get a lot of practical effects, but it's touched up and enhanced and sort of peppered in with digital effects to kind of fill around it. And so it's like this great little sweet spot where it's not the world where everything is just digital. There's still a lot of really good practical effects enhanced with computer technology, which is very nice. And I like that Orga's got a shoulder cannon. I like that the sort of that the UFO incarnation has a cannon on it, and then Orga has a shoulder cannon. Like it almost like implies that maybe the creature sort of maybe it's got this like fluid state, and it encased the UFO was like a shell around it, and then it's in this like nebulous fluid state, and so that like maybe the shell isn't really, maybe it's not part of the alien, but maybe it's this weird sort of like like the shell that a crab might go into or something, or the shell of like a snail, where it's like it's kind of part of it, but it can kind of go out of it, and so then it like leaves the UFO shell, becomes Orga, but it can still direct the shell around, but like it carries over the cannon, like clearly the cannon energy is coming from the alien creature itself, and so Orga carries over the cannon, and I like that. It's got, if you just zoom in on the face, people have talked about how it's got kind of a G98 look, which is kind of interesting. I feel like Toho's making a jab by making a creature that's trying to become a Godzilla clone. That it's like they're trying to poke a jab at like the American version was trying to be a clone of Godzilla, but it's not as good. And I like that as it absorbs more and more Godzilla, it kind of becomes like the spikes grow on the back, and it kind of becomes a bit more Godzilla-esque, and it's just like it's a great creature. It's not a super like agile and mobile creature, but it's got this like giant leaping ability. When the mouth opens up, and it's got this it's almost like it's hypnotizing Godzilla, and Godzilla goes in it and is like it's trying to swallow Godzilla whole. Like it's just like this really, it is a cool design, and it's one of those monsters that it's like for a one-off monster that never appeared again. Like I would love to get another version of Orga down the road.
I absolutely would too. Like we said, there was a great creature design for this film, and everything you said, I agree with about Orga. I mean, it's great, but where does Godzilla 2000 fall on your tier ranking with such great monster designs in it?
It would have, I mean, gosh, I don't know I mean, it's certainly up there. I love these designs. I love this is a very, someone once said that like it's a very handsome Godzilla design. And it's like, yeah, it's just a very aesthetically very well balanced and well proportioned Godzilla design. Like it's just a great look. And just in the same way that the Heisei version got to kind of become this iconic look, I could have seen a version of reality where we got this, 3, 4, 5 movies with this design, and people just ate it up because I feel like it's an underused look and design. It's a great Godzilla design.
Yeah, it's one of the best in my opinion. And if we are including Godzilla 98 with this Millennium series, which I believe we are, I think I know where Godzilla 2000 falls and where Godzilla 98 falls on our tier ranking.
Yeah, if Godzilla 98 is Star Trek the motion picture, then Godzilla 2000 is Star Trek the Wrath of Khan. It's the far superior, lower budget, but much more true to the source material follow-up.
And I am 100% going to agree with you on that. If we're going from bottom to top, G98 is 2 or in the bottom spot, and Godzilla 2000 takes the number 1 spot so far with a couple films to go in this Millennium era.
Certainly. But, and not a knock on Godzilla 98. Not a knock on Godzilla 98, but, Godzilla 2000 is like, you're following up like kind of an oddball Godzilla movie with like an excellent Godzilla movie. So it is what it is.
Yeah, you're following up Son of Godzilla with Mecha Godzilla 74. So you're automatically put to the bottom. All right, Chris, you wanna give us some final thoughts on here before we get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else I can say. This is a great entry level Godzilla movie. If you've, I strongly recommend the American version over the Japanese version. This is the one case where I would overtly do that and very strongly do it. And it is one of those cases where the difference is so wide for me that it's like, most of them, whether you're talking about the American or Japanese version, it wouldn't really impact my level of recommendation of them really. But for this one, it's like the Japanese version is not really anything to write home about for me, and the American version, like I just love it to death. So I strongly recommend the American version if you've got some younger family members that you're trying to give them like a gateway drug Godzilla movie. You don't want to dive back to the 60s. You want to give them something that's a little fresher, but maybe not start them off right away with the new American movies. Like this is a great gateway drug Godzilla movie. This is a great starting point for a lot of new and prospective fans.
Absolutely. And I agree with everything you said very strongly. Love this film. If you haven't seen it, give it a shot. And I mean, even if this is something that you want to introduce your kids to or friends to or something, but then you want to take a shot on the Japanese version yourself just to see the differences, go ahead. I mean, I enjoyed the Japanese version. I just enjoy the American dub version tenfold compared to the other version of this film, and it's not even close.
Yeah, and I hate to say that. It sounds like I'm crapping on the Japanese version, but again, it just feels like the difference between the two. It feels like you're watching like the sort of assembly cut or the sort of second to last cut, and then you're watching the final edit with all the polish and finishing touches put on it.
Yeah, and like we've said this whole episode, it is definitely a superior film to the Japanese cut.
Yeah, very hard for me to argue otherwise.
Some people may not agree, and that is 100% okay.
Yeah.
But Chris and I were fanboys of the 2000 film, not the 99 film.
Yeah, 100%. Godzilla 2000 over Godzilla 2000 Millennium.
I think that's all we got for this episode on Godzilla 2000. And again, listening to us fanboy over this one, I mean, there's probably only a couple left. You'll have to hear us both fanboy over. I'm sure a couple of these episodes will be one or the other.
But hey, we're fans. We fanboy. That's just the name of the game,
Oh yeah, don't worry. We got some hate coming up. I mean, we're not gonna be terrible with it, but we got some bad things to say about some films coming up. But
the gloves are coming off. The gloves are coming off.
We'll never say more bad than good because clearly we are huge fans of this entire franchise.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, all right, Chris. I think again that is it for this Godzilla 2000 episode. Next week we have Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, which was released on December 16th of 2000. So this in Japan was released 4 months after Godzilla 2000 was released over here in the States.
Which is kind of wild. It's kind of interesting to hear, that Toho didn't stop, and it's like, you just got to think if, again, I'm not going to go off on they should have made a direct sequel to this movie, but they really should have made a direct sequel to this movie.
Well, we can't talk them into it now.
Yeah, it's too late. The ship has sailed.
That's all right. But we will look at Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, and we will go at it again next week. So, Chris, thanks for joining me on this one. I love doing the episodes where we can both just love the same film and that we can agree with everything each other says. It makes it much easier.
Oh yeah, it goes down a little better when one of us doesn't have to strongly defend a movie the other one hates.
Yeah, and episodes are a little bit longer when we can both continuously just talk and love the same film.
Yeah, just heap the praise over and over and over again.
Absolutely. So we're gonna keep it rolling again next week with Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. So Chris, again, thanks for joining me. Thanks anyone who's listening out there, and until next time.